Good evening. We want to welcome all those tuning in tonight to Answers for the Paranormal on a beautiful Friday night here on the east coast of the United States, August the 25th, 2017. My name's Bill Posey. I'm your host for the broadcast tonight, and on the line with me, over in his office in Horsham, PA, is my co-host, Joe Marodi. What's going on tonight, Joe?
Good evening, Bill. Yes, it is a nice Friday night here on the East Coast here in southeastern Pennsylvania. Unlike Texas, where they're bracing for what may or may not be a catastrophic event, as we were talking a little earlier, Bill. We remember last summer when the dire predictions, I don't even remember the name of the hurricane that was supposed to hit Florida. Was it Matthew?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, and that really turned out to be much ado about nothing. So we'll see with this impending Hurricane Harvey that is about to hit the Texas coast and inland.
Yeah.
So we're not dealing with that. We've had some very, very beautiful, almost fall-like weather here. So it's something that we're really enjoying here in Pennsylvania, and it's supposed to go on for another few days. So, but beside that, Bill, we're going to talk about some serious issues tonight, and it's weird. Something's missing tonight.
Yeah, our fifth.
That's the fifth Beatle is missing. Yeah, she's about to hit the big time. So I don't know if we'll be able to get her. We'll be able to get her back, Bill. She's her head she's headlining now out there.
I know.
She might forget us peons after she's got her name posted in the bright lights of Seattle.
Yeah, there you go. Tina, if you're listening, we love you. We can't wait to have you back on. But we wish you all the best out there.
That's right. We can't pay you what those organizers of the event that you're going to be participating in. That's you. But we think that you bring a lot to our broadcast. But tonight we're going to have to get through it without Tina. It's all me and you tonight, brother.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Lone Ranger and Tano tonight.
Which one am I, Joe?
I don't know. Let the listeners decide who that is.
All right.
It doesn't matter to me.
Kemosabe, let's move on here. Yeah. Again, we are Answers for the Paranormal. It's been a long time since Joe and I have done a broadcast of our own where the two of us get on here and talk about events, and we want to talk about the recent event that took place 2 weeks ago in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I titled the broadcast tonight, "The New Age in Charlottesville." And as we get through tonight, that title will begin to make sense. Joe has some awesome material to share tonight regarding this, and I'm really looking forward to what we have to bring tonight. A little bit about us, Joe. You wanna do that? You want to take a couple minutes and, for any new listeners we may have tuning in, just tell them who Answers for the Paranormal is.
Yeah, we've been at this, Bill, since 2010. We're a Christian ministry. We address the paranormal craze that this country and the world really has been engaged in since the turn of this century. Although we do... we have spent a lot of time, a lot of broadcasts on what we title and what have come to be known as false flag events. We started out addressing the paranormal from a Christian biblical worldview perspective with topics such as what are ghosts, what are aliens, do UFOs exist, things of that nature, where we have made clear in the past that we believe that these are satanic deceptions carried out through the use of demonic forces. We have produced many programs in the past, way back to 2010. I'd say we're pushing up would you say at least anywhere from 75 to 100 broadcasts?
Yeah,
would you say that's accurate?
I think that's accurate, Joe. We're probably somewhere close to 100 by now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they're all 2-3 hours long, and sometimes they go on for part 2, part 3, part 4, 5, 6. I think one went up to 7, the Sandy Hook broadcast. Mm-hmm. But we, even though we've strayed away from the quote-unquote paranormal at times, we've always maintained that even though we are not addressing, per se, the paranormal at any given time, during, let's say, a false flag broadcast, like we're doing tonight, overall, what we've maintained is that it all gets back to a satanic agenda, an Illuminati agenda in these false flag events, mm-hmm. for the main purpose of installing his man of lawlessness, the Antichrist, as the world would call him, and the devil has done this through various means, and he's setting the world stage for this ruler to come on the scene. And for those who are listening who say, "Well, you guys are whacked out" or something. Well, we're just going from what the Scriptures say, and it's clear from Scripture in Revelation, in Thessalonians, in the Gospel of John, in Matthew, that Jesus himself and the disciples all taught that a ruler would come on the scene, and specifically, as Paul states in 2 Thessalonians, this man of lawlessness would be recognized by the world and adored and worshipped by the world because of the false counterfeit signs and miracles that he's performing through the work of the devil. He's actually going to be possessed by the devil. So as outlandish and outrageous and fantastic as that sounds, we're only talking to you from the Scriptures. So, we've come to some very concrete conclusions, and we've entered into some speculation, and which is what we're going to do tonight. But the earnest goal of this ministry, Bill, has always been to uphold the Word of God, to expose evil, to stand firm on the Word and the testimony of Jesus Christ. We'll make mistakes, for sure, but as we've always pointed out in the past, we depend on people listening for any errors that we may bring forth during the broadcast. We certainly don't want them to go unnoticed, and we want to be corrected. But we do what we do because we're Christians, and we know that there's evil in the world, Bill, and we know that there is a spiritual force. There is an angelic being that Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2, identifies him as the prince of the power of the air that is at work in all those who love lawlessness. Mm-hmm. So we're doing our best to expose those schemes that he weaves. He's not sitting around on a cloud somewhere, not engaging in the events of the world, but you really have to be looking for it. It's easy to dismiss things that happen as just happen chance and circumstance and bad luck, but none of those things are biblical. We firmly believe that the devil is completely engaged in these world events that really bring about significant change in the way human beings think, in the way human beings think about life, in the way they think about where we came from, where we're going. Is there a God? Are there aliens? So the devil's involved in all of these details. But he knows how to hide. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is sometimes he hides in plain sight, which I think within the Charlottesville incident
Yeah.
is a couple of things happened in plain sight, in my opinion. So that's who we are, and that's what we do, and we're going to keep doing it, and as long as the Lord allows breath to stay in our lungs.
Amen. Yeah, thanks, Joe. And just to inform, our website address on the web is www.answersfortheparanormal.org. You go there, check us out. Our contact information, we have a contact tab actually on our website, so you can click on that, and if you click on either one of the email addresses there, joe@answersfortheparanormal.org or william@answersfortheparanormal.org, you click on that, it'll open up your web browser and you'll be able to shoot us off an email. So as Joe stated, if you want to challenge us on anything or correct us on anything, please send us off an email. If you want to comment on anything that you heard us say as well, you can send us an email, and we'd be more than pleased to enter into dialogue with you. It's it's one of the reasons why we've done this, is to be able to talk with people, to be able to warn them about the things that they engage in, especially if it involves the occult, and on broadcasts such as tonight to engage people in conversation with open minds who would consider what we have to say, and so we really hope that you would go to our website and contact us, and as I said, we'd be more than happy to enter in a dialogue with you. All right, Joe, you want to get started with the information tonight?
Yeah, and as you started out a few moments ago, Bill, in describing the program tonight, the series of incidents that took place 2 weekends ago now in Charlottesville, Virginia. When they happened, I put on CNN and I began to watch as much as I possibly could. I mean, I did have to work, so when I could, I would sit down and watch the quote unquote news broadcast of CNN, and I stuck mostly with them because I think that they. And I'll just say this right at the outset. I believe that many of these events are staged. I can't be specific about whether anybody died or not in this particular incident. But I will say that, as in all of the other false flag events going back to 9/11, where people certainly did die. Yeah. We're thinking about Sandy Hook and the Boston Marathon bombing, the Orlando nightclub incident, San Bernardino, Charleston, South Carolina. We've done a number of shows on all of those events. I believe firmly that they were all staged to varying degrees, and I believe that while CNN is not the stager, they are the outlet, one of the outlets. I mean, you could think of MSNBC as another outlet for the propaganda that these events have pushed forward, the agendas that they have pushed forward. So I think that an examination of CNN's handling of the Charlottesville incident is warranted, and we're also going to look at the use of code, and we're going to look at the fallout from Charlottesville. And I'm going to ask some people to think, our listeners to think about some things that I thought about. and also I have some conclusions that I want to share with our listeners. So, again, I want to focus on this in this first segment on CNN's involvement in this. For those of you who are aware, when the commercials go away and CNN comes on, we hear the voice of the actor James Earl Jones saying, "The most trusted source for news." Okay? You know, that's James Earl Jones, the most trusted source for news. Well, that's laughable to many people because CNN is not an actual news organization. It is basically an agenda-driven rant group that poses as a news outlet. Mm-hmm. But in reality, Bill, is nothing more than the world according to its hosts and panelists. And this was never more clear to me than it was in watching the coverage of the Charlottesville incident, CNN's coverage of the Charlottesville incident, where it was made clear to me, it was, you know, it was clear to me before, but it became crystal clear how agenda-driven this quote-unquote news outlet is. Let me read the definition from Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. Did I get that backwards? Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary, a Merriam-Webster dictionary. This is the definition of journalism, Bill. The collection and editing of material of current interest for presentation through news media. The editorial or business management of an agency engaged in the collection and dissemination of news. An academic study concerned with the collection and editing of news or the management of a news medium. Writing characterized by a direct presentation of facts or description of events without an attempt at interpretation. I repeat, writing characterized by a direct presentation of facts or description of events without an attempt at interpretation. This is where CNN fails, and if people want to comment on other news outlets, feel free to. I focus on CNN. They do not present the news as it is happening. They are not concerned with the collection and editing of news or the management of a news medium. Mm-hmm. They are interested in interpretation of the alleged events. And again, that was never more clear to me than watching their coverage of Charlottesville when they had host after host come on and make an opening statement, mm-hmm. and not even presenting the facts as they were alleged to have happened. A host would come on and make an opening statement as in a court case, and then they would bring on panelists to support the agenda, to agree with them. Mm-hmm. One of those, Bill, was Don Lemon. Yeah. For those of you who aren't aware of Don Lemon, he is the 10 o'clock host of CNN. 10 p.m. he comes on. So the day of the... Was it the day or the day after? I'm not sure. It was either the day of the event or the day after. He opened up his show with his history of slavery and stated that we cannot understand what is happening now if we don't understand the history of slavery. Which to me, Bill, means that the majority of the participants on both sides of this argument whether they were there in Charlottesville or commenting from the sidelines, don't understand what is happening, because who really understands the history of slavery? Who really understands it? And I can look at what happened in Charlottesville, and I think I can judge for myself without knowing the absolute history of slavery. I can look at the events that transpired there and come to a conclusion as to what happened there, where the agendas were, what actually happened, without knowing the full history of slavery. So to me, that was an absurd statement to come on and say at that time. Don Lemon, Bill, he also called the Charlottesville marchers cowards. He said at least the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, were hoods. Now think about that. He has it completely reversed. And I'm telling you, that's the statement that he made. He said at least the KKK were hoods, that these guys are cowards. I would say that whether you adhere to, and I'll get into this a little bit later, what these guys stood for, we don't really know what they stand for, or not. They did not wear hoods. They were open as to who they were, like them or not. The KKK, on the other hand, when they did their evil deeds, they wore hoods. Now, who's the coward? So Don Lemon has it completely upside down. And now he brings on a panelist by the name of David Gergen. For those of you who are not familiar with David Gergen, he's an American political commentator and a former presidential advisor who served during the administrations of Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton. He is currently a senior political analyst for CNN and a professor of public service and co-director of the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School. David Gergen, he's well-polished, and, he's established, and he's been around, and he's been in several different administrations. The things that people say, Bill, that they're not held accountable for is amazing to me. Mr. Gergen said that Trump cannot deal with hate groups when there is, quote, hatred in his own heart. Donald Trump cannot deal with hate groups when there is hatred in his own heart. Now, Bill, what a cowardly charge to make. What evidence does Mr. Gergen have that Donald Trump has hatred in his own heart? No evidence at all. There was a Virginia, and I tried to find this. I was watching CNN Live when this elected official in Virginia was being interviewed by Anderson Cooper. He came right out, this is an elected official, and accused Donald Trump of being a white supremacist. Okay? Again, where is the evidence that Donald Trump is a white supremacist? You may not like Donald Trump, but you can't charge him with being a white supremacist or a bigot without evidence. You can't make those charges. You can talk about him over the water cooler, okay, if you want. But when you come on in an official position as a senior analyst and make these charges against the President of the United States, you better have some evidence to back it up.
Yeah.
Moving on, and anytime, Bill, just step right in if you want to add some comments.
Sure.
Certainly welcome. Here's another one. Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson is a national Republican political strategist and media consultant based in Florida who has produced television for governors, U.S. Senate candidates, super PACs, and corporations. He became well known during the 2016 United States presidential election for his vitriolic denunciations of Donald Trump and supporters of Trump. I'm going to stop there. I'll pick that up. But here is what Rick Wilson said when interviewed as a panelist on CNN. He said that Donald Trump is morally unfit to be president. This was echoed by all of the panelists. They all chimed in that Donald Trump was morally unfit to be president. Now this guy, I'll continue with Wikipedia's description of him. Example, and before I move on, I would ask Mr. Wilson, what is your definition of morality? Where does your moral code come from when you say that Donald Trump is morally unfit to be president? That would insinuate that there is a moral code that you would adhere to that must have been met by past presidents, in your opinion. Now, here are some of the examples of Rick Wilson's behavior. He asked Ann Coulter via Twitter if Trump, quote, unquote, pays more for anal, unquote. And on MSNBC, referring to some Trump supporters as, quote, childless single men who masturbate to anime. And anime is, for those of you who aren't aware of it, they're hand-drawn or it's hand-drawn or computer animation, cartoonish stuff. So this is the moral Mr. Rick Wilson, with statements like that on record. Moving on, Anna Navarro. These are all regular, Bill. These are all regular contributors to CNN's panel. Almost every time I turn it on after some sort of a crazy event, these are all the same people that they bring in. They bring in all the time, all the same people. Anna Navarro. For those of you who do not know who Anna Navarro is, she is a Nicaraguan American Republican strategist and political commentator for various news outlets, including CNN en Español, ABC News, Telemundo, and The View. She said this. She called Trump a misogynist, racist, bigoted pig. Now think about that, Bill. This is a panelist on a major news outlet calling the President of the United States a misogynist, racist, bigoted pig. I would ask Ms. Navarro, where is your evidence that Donald Trump hates women and distrusts women?
Right.
How well do you know Donald Trump that you are going to call him a misogynist? How well do you know Donald Trump that you're going to call him a racist who believes that the white race is superior to all other races? What evidence do you have that he's a bigot? That he has anything against any other nationality, ethnicity, religion? Where is your evidence that Mr. Trump is currently, there may have been things in the past that may have suggested those things. People can accuse me of being things that I was years and years ago. That's not who I am today. So when you make those claims about Donald Trump, you better have some current evidence, because people change. And it's completely irresponsible for these individuals to come on and make these statements. Here's a good one, Bill. This may be one of my favorite ones. April Ryan. And again, a regular contributor to CNN.
Mm-hmm.
April Ryan is an American journalist and author. Since 1997, she has served as a White House correspondent and is the Washington, D.C. bureau chief for American Urban Radio Network. She is among the best known of the White House press corps. In 2017, she joined CNN as a political analyst. In May 2017, the National Association of Black Journalists named Ryan as the Journalist of the Year. And boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, I just love how these groups separate themselves by black this and black this and black that and black that. Whenever I hear that, the black clergy, black congressionals, black whatever.
Yeah.
I don't listen. I don't listen. You guys want to focus on your color and you want to separate yourself, and then you want to scream and yell when you think other people do the same thing? No, that is an irrelevant award given to this woman. I don't even want to hear stuff like that. Now, here's what she said, Bill. In referring to Charlottesville, and this is in response to the hue and cry that went up when Donald Trump, the first night, did not label these marchers as white supremacists and Nazis and hate groups. He didn't identify them as terrorists. Here's what April Ryan said. She said, quote, "This is more than murder. It's terrorism."
Wow.
Now, maybe you can explain that to me, Bill.
I can't.
What is worse, murder or terrorism?
To me, there's nothing.
Terrorism, go ahead.
Yeah, murder is definitely the worst of... Now, terrorism could result in murder, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Terrorism falls under a broad heading.
It does.
People can terrorize each other without killing them. But this nitwit comes out and says, trying to make a point, makes one of the most stupid statements I've ever heard. This is worse than murder. It's terrorism. No. Murder is the worst possible thing that can occur.
Right.
And she didn't go challenged. That's ridiculous, nonsensical statement went unchallenged. Here's another thing that she said. She said that Donald Trump's slogan from the campaign last year, "Make America Great Again," is code for white nationalism. She said that he says one thing to the press while standing for another. I would ask, what is your evidence, April Ryan, that this slogan is code? And without evidence, it's slander.
Yep.
Charlottesville mayor. This guy's a real humdinger, Bill.
Oh, I know.
Charlottesville Mayor Michael Signer. He was on CNN the day that it happened. The day that the incident in Charlottesville took place. Anderson Cooper was interviewing him. And he started, and I had to shake my head, and I think to myself, I'm thinking to myself, I was listening to this guy talk, is this guy really doing this right now?
Mm-hmm.
He began with a long dialogue about how great a town Charlottesville is, which was essentially about 5 minutes of a promotional spot for the city, which was reprehensible in light of the news that we had 3 alleged deaths that were related to this incident. So this guy was a typical politician, not beginning by expressing remorse for what happened. He began with a promotional spot with basically it's like, I love New York, I love Charlottesville. Reprehensible. No character whatsoever. And in a subsequent interview, Bill, on CNN, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, he almost verbatim echoed the words of Connecticut Governor Daniel Malloy after the Sandy Hook false flag evil visited our town today. And I'll talk about this a bit later. Here's what a lot of things disturb me about this, Bill. But here's the one thing that maybe disturbed me more than anything. CNN, at no time did CNN get a marcher on to share their side of the story with regards to both the intentions for their march and what precipitated the ensuing violent clashes. This is what true journalists would have done, Bill. This is what a true news broadcast based on true journalism would do. Instead, what they did was they heaped to themselves a bunch of panelists who really didn't even talk about the event itself. They talked about Donald Trump's, their perception of his non-response to the event. How can you have something that occurred like this? The first thing that I would do as an executive making the decisions for a news broadcast, I want someone to come on with us from both sides. Apparently, from what we were told, there were 2 sides. The marchers who got the permit to march in protest of the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee, and those who were, clothed in white with angels' halos who were protesting them. The first thing that I would have done is I want to get people from both sides. I want to get a sampling of both groups. Bring them on. Forget about April Ryan and Anna Navarro and David Gergen. Forget about those. We hear them all the time. Let's get 3 or 4 or 5 people from both sides and hear their stories, rather than having other people tell me what they believe. Now, does that make sense, Bill?
Absolutely makes sense.
Not once did I see this happen on CNN. And to my knowledge, it hasn't happened since. Now, what I do know is that CNN played some nonsense YouTube from one of the alleged marchers. See, that's all secondhand garbage. That's not journalism.
No.
That's something I would expect to find in the Star magazine at the checkout line at the grocery store or the National Enquirer. Because that's basically what CNN is, the National Enquirer on television. Here's another thing that disturbed me greatly, Bill. CNN's suggestion that neo-Nazism is above ground, and the gross misrepresentation and the exaggeration of the scope of Charlottesville. I mean, the response of CNN and other, I call them hate news outlets, would have America believing that the KKK held rallies all across America. Like you would turn on your TV and they would have reporters in Denver and Los Angeles and Chicago and Philadelphia and Miami, and there would be all these marchers for these racist white groups This is how they portrayed it on CNN, that it's a nationwide problem. That it's I know that there's hatred out there on many. I'll echo Trump's on many sides. If people want to tell me that black people, there aren't black groups that hate white people, you're living in a fairy tale land. To think that somehow people of color, quote unquote, have eliminated hatred from their DNA and they just love people all the time. There's hate out there everywhere.
Yep.
But don't exaggerate the scope of Charlottesville to make it look like it's a nationwide epidemic. I mean, it's not the Black Plague that killed hundreds of millions of people in Europe. Stick to the facts, CNN. This happened in Charlottesville. It was confined to Charlottesville. It's completely irresponsible. And instead of the anger bill being directed at what CNN has portrayed as white hate groups and their ideologies, the focus of attention was almost exclusively, Bill, directed at Donald Trump's response to Charlottesville. There was little, if any, examination of what the marchers stood for, because they took the easy road.
Yeah.
They attacked Trump the night of the event, and then 2 days after, it just wasn't enough for them, his response.
Yeah. I'd like to comment a little bit here, Joe, if I could.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Before beginning your examination of CNN, and let me just say that I think that you're completely accurate in portraying who they are, and anyone who is honest in wanting to know the truth, you're not going to find the total truth in watching CNN, because as Joe stated, they take an event and they spin it to an agenda that they have, to give commentary on what they believed happened. And I think that you were so right in saying, Joe, that if you really wanted to know what happened, you would get both sides together to find out what really happened on that day in Charlottesville. But what you said was that you believed that this was a staged event.
Right.
And I just want to read something here. This was published on August the 22nd in Newsweek magazine. And this is the byline on this is a Jason Lemire. And here's the headline, Joe. Idaho Republican insists that it is plausible Barack Obama staged Charlottesville white nationalist rally violence. And very interesting article. Let me just read it. I mean, when I get through it,
sure,
you'll see that Jason Lemire doesn't go along with what this Idaho Republican says, but I think that what he maintained here is certainly thought-provoking. Here's the article. A Republican state lawmaker in Idaho refused to back away Monday from his claims that the deadly violence following a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia earlier this month might have been staged with the help of former President Barack Obama. And just let me comment for a second on that first line that he has there. The deadly violence following a white nationalist rally Is that really what it was? Was it a white nationalist rally? Or
No.
was it in fact a protest regarding the removal of a statue from a Civil War statue from Emancipation Park? I believe that's accurately what it was. It was not a white nationalist rally, but let me go on. Representative Brian Zollinger, that's his name, that's the representatives from Idaho, shared an article last week that suggested that Unite the Right March was orchestrated by Barack Obama along with other leading Democrats such as Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, Charlottesville Mayor Michael Zigner, and billionaire donor George Soros. After his sharing of the article from a conservative site that's called The American Thinker began to receive significant backlash on his Facebook page, Zollinger wrote that he thought the unsubstantiated piece was interesting, in quotations, and thought-provoking, in quotations, and that some of the theories were certainly plausible. Despite the criticism from across Idaho and the country, Zollinger said he was not backing away from his belief that there was at least a kernel of truth in this article. At first, this is a quote from him, "At first I felt genuinely bad that maybe I had offended somebody," he said in an interview Monday with the Idaho Post-Register. "Since then, the amazing amount of hate and despicable things that have been said about myself, my wife, and my kids, I've now doubled down." American Thinker regularly posts articles with misleading claims. Its piece on Charlottesville questions whether the rally was set up to smear President Donald Trump as a racist. What if Zigner and McAuliffe, in conjunction with Antifa and other Soros-funded groups like Black Lives Matter, planned and orchestrated what happened in Charlottesville and meant for these events to unfold roughly as they did, the article read. Zollinger gave no suggestion of wanting to back away from sharing such unfounded speculation, even raising the possibility of direct involvement by Trump's predecessor. Barack Obama was a community organizer before he was President of the United States, Zollinger said. I still do think that it is plausible. In Charlottesville, one woman died when a car, reportedly driven by an individual with links to white supremacists, drove through a crowd of counter-protesters. In the aftermath, Trump received strong criticism, even from members of his own party, for blaming both sides for the violence. The president also said that there were very fine people on both sides, referring to white nationalists and also to the counter-protesters. And that's the end of the story. So,
wow.
Yeah. Here you have an elected official, Joe, that came out and stands where you do, saying that this may have been a staged event. And of course,
I'll go further. I'll go further and say that it was a stage event.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Okay, and predictably, he received the criticism by saying such a thing. And I'm sure now, Joe, since August the 22nd, he's now been labeled as a conspiracy theorist, which is a label that's given to somebody who wants to give an alternative to what may have happened. Today, a conspiracist is... and how many times did we see this linked to Donald Trump during the campaign? You know, and that's the new dirty word today, Joe. Conspiracy theorist.
I know that, Bill, and the connection between what is understood today, when you mentioned conspiracy theorist, is that of the movie I think the movie was actually called Conspiracy Theorist with Mel Gibson, where it's basically someone who's completely off the wall.
Yeah.
And is somehow mentally deficient. And so therefore they hear voices in their head, and they come up with wild theories. So, it's such a ridiculous position to hold. If you don't understand the history of conspiracies, we just went through a whole, 3 shows with Tina Foster about the Federal Reserve System?
Yeah.
What was that, if not a conspiracy, when you had all of those rich and powerful men meeting together on Jekyll Island to conspire to overtake the banking system and the printing of money in this country back in 1913? What, if not a conspiracy, was that, you morons who believe that conspiracies don't happen?
Yeah.
That's a very large one that's there in plain sight for you to see that you still ignore.
Yep.
And let me say also for this congressman that the guy's got guts.
He does.
To hold his position because he went against the flow. These Republican, Democrat, I've always said there ain't a dime's worth of difference between the two. I don't care if you call yourself a Republican or a Democrat. Just let me hear what you have to say on certain issues. I don't care what the hell you call yourself.
Right.
So this guy went against the flow when all of these quote-unquote Republicans took the easy road and jumped on Trump's back in the middle of all this. Now, the question has to be asked, Bill, why staged? If this congressman is suggesting that it may have been staged, that these characters were involved, such as Obama and Soros, why staged? I'm not going to answer that now. I'll answer that at the end of the program. Before we go on, I want to make a couple things clear. Very clear. Number one, racism, white nationalism, if you're a black person that hates white people, if you're an Indian that hates Pakistanis, in this country, hatred is not illegal. Believing that you are superior in race to another is not illegal. However, what is illegal is when you violate the constitutional rights of another human being based on your belief. So you can say whatever you want about these quote-unquote white hate groups and white nationalist groups. Under the Constitution, their beliefs, although I don't adhere to them, are covered and protected. And right off of that, Bill, we do not support hate in any way, shape, or form. As believers in Jesus Christ, how could we? Understanding that the Scriptures make clear that in Christ there is no difference in who we are. Ethnicity goes out the window. And I have made clear in the past my disgust at many white supremacist groups who use the name of Christ.
Amen.
And I have said that many times in the past. So I don't want anybody listening to this broadcast thinking that I'm siding with white supremacists. You believe that? Go watch CNN. So thanks for sharing that, Bill. Let me move on here, picking up where I left off. Bill, there's been a concerted effort on CNN by both hosts and guests to portray Donald Trump as a racist and a bigot now. the man now, not years ago, now. CNN would have America believe that their president hates women, hates blacks, hates Latinos, hates people of color, hates immigrants. That's what CNN would have America believe without any evidence other than things that they've dredged up from the past. You dredge up stuff from my past, and I'll tell you, Bill, people probably wouldn't even listen to me. But I'm not the same man now as I was 10 years ago or 10 years before that. People change. I believe Donald Trump has changed, and I'm not saying that he ever was a racist or a misogynist or a bigot. I'm just saying that who is the man now? Who is the man now? So unless you have evidence, again, that he is all of these horrible things that you are claiming he is, shut your mouth. Bring evidence to the table. Don't bring passion to the table. That doesn't equate to reality. I don't care if Anna Navarro comes on, and boy, if you ever watched her, Bill, oh boy, she gets so mad, and she just lambastes Trump and this. But there's no evidence. There's no evidence. And it's been laughable, Bill, to watch Trump, quote-unquote, Trump supporters on CNN. Now, with these supporters, Trump needs more enemies, I'm telling you, Bill. Because this is another example of the disingenuous nature of CNN reporting.
Yes.
You know, they'll have somebody, and if you weren't watching the TV, you think, wow, this person really hates Donald Trump. Listen to those things that they're saying. And then you look at the TV, and underneath, Trump supporter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a Trump supporter. Right. Baloney. Now, here's where, as I said at the outset of the program, Bill, that I'm going to engage in a little bit of speculation. Mm-hmm. And whether people believe me or agree with me, I really couldn't care less. I've watched enough of the news, quote-unquote, news coverage in the wake of these events, these false flags. You get a second sense. You get a sense of what you're watching and what just is not real. It's staged. And again, CNN, not the stager, but they are the middleman presenting the finished product to America and to the world. So as I'm watching the news footage from CNN, I'm seeing the marchers with the torchers, and I'm telling you, Bill, it looks staged to me. I can't answer how they did it. I don't know, but it reminded me of the looped footage that we all saw in Sandy Hook when you saw the military guys walking down Riverside Road. Remember, you had the little guy that was about 4 foot tall in the beginning, at the very beginning of the line of military men. Yeah. And they were walking down Riverside. You saw that over and over and over again. You see people going in and out of the firehouse, among other looped footage sequences of events. Then, same thing with Boston. Same thing with Orlando. How many times did I see in Orlando the guy with the fedora hat carrying an alleged victim down the street away from the hospital? How many times did I see that looped footage? They just run it over and over and over again, and they just keep re-impressing in your mind that this is a real event. So when I watched this Charlottesville incident, it reminded me of all of these other fake footage presentations. The whole event, to me, Bill, was orchestrated, and it was designed. And I'm going back to 9/11. The whole event was orchestrated and is designed for the purpose of dividing people to get us to notice the color of our skin. Yeah. More so with this event than not with 9/11, but right. In this event, that's what to me, that is what the goal was in this event. And let me go back to Sandy Hook for a second. For those of you who don't believe what I'm saying, there was a shot of these military men. I don't know whether they were supposed to be National Guard or some sort of a paramilitary group. Among them was the father of alleged victim Ben Wheeler, one of the alleged child victims of Sandy Hook. You can find that if you Google it on YouTube. Clearly, David Wheeler was playing two parts that day, as a grieving father and as a National Guardsman or whatever, marching into Sandy Hook. Now, they hope that people don't notice stuff like that, but somebody caught it. Somebody caught it. And this David Wheeler has gone on to... He was one of the foremost voices, along with Nicole Hockley, in trying to bring about new gun legislation. Insofar as that, him and his wife gave the presidential address on, I think it happens on a Saturday morning after Sandy Hook. No one had ever done that before. Each president that has an address. I think it's on Saturday mornings.
Yeah, it is Saturday.
But David Wheeler and his wife gave the address. So these people were intricate in getting that Sandy Hook orchestrated event carried out. They were two of the main players in that. So when I looked at Charlottesville, Bill, like I said, I have all of these other false flag events in my mind, and I see the telltale signs of something being acted out. Can I prove it? No, I can't prove it. That is my sense. Accept it for what it is. Do your own research. Now, there was as I said earlier, Bill, April Ryan had accused Donald Trump of using code with his "Make America Great Again." You know, she's suggesting that America would be great if it was a white America. That's exactly what she was suggesting. She was suggesting that this was code for that. And it was also, Bill, it was also agreed to by other hosts and panelists that "Make America Great Again" was a code for a white nationalist movement.
Wow.
And white supremacy. And I'll tell you, Bill, when you talk about conspiracy theories, to say something like that, this makes you a conspiracy theorist. Because Trump would have had to have either met or would have had to have been made aware of the origins of this alleged code. It's a total conspiracy theory. This makes you people conspiracy theorists to suggest that the President of the United States conspired with white supremacists to come up with this slogan, "Make America Great Again," that it means white supremacy. You're the conspiracy theorist.
Wow, that's the first I heard of that. Incredible.
Look, Bill, like I said, I know what I saw, I know what I heard. They said it on more than one occasion. And when she said that, silence is agreement. This is one of the things that has come out of this whole event, is that, if you don't stand up against white supremacy, then you're agreeing with it. Your silence is agreeing with it. Well, when she makes a statement like this and the other panelists twiddle their thumbs, you're agreeing with her. You are all conspiracy theorists, believing that the president conspired with these hate groups to make America great again. And this is mainstream news. This is not news. This is not journalism. This is interpretation and fantasy.
Yep. No wonder they're called fake news.
Yeah. And I admit that some of the things that I'm talking about tonight, I'm speculating. I believe that they're true, but I admit that it's speculation. They'll never admit that.
No.
She didn't come on and say, look, I'm going to make a statement here. It's speculation, but here's what I believe. No, she just came out and said it's code. It's code for white nationalism. I almost fell off my chair when I heard that, and nobody else said anything. They should have said, well, look, I don't like Donald Trump, and I disagree with his response to Charlottesville, but I can't agree with April Ryan there. I can't say that "Make America Great Again" is code for whites taking over America. No, everybody stayed silent, and a few actually agreed with her openly. Okay. I'm hearing some interference. Are you hearing it, Bill?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Again, I'll admit here is speculation. But when I heard Michael Signer, the mayor of Charlottesville, say this, I got a cold chill down my spine. When he was interviewed by Anderson Cooper, he said, evil visited our town today.
Wow.
Almost verbatim echoing the statements of Governor Dan Malloy, Connecticut Governor Dan Malloy, in his press conference the night of Sandy Hook, 12/14/12, when he said evil visited this community today. Signer said evil visited our town today. I believe that that's code. Here's another issue that I believe is code. Heather Meyer, or Heather Heyer, her mother. Heather Heyer was the woman who was allegedly killed by David Fields by plowing into the group of anti-protesters. She, at her daughter's memorial service, she encouraged mourners to wear purple. And by the way, now, why would someone say that at their child's... And I heard the audio. I heard it in KYW. Why would someone encourage mourners to wear purple? Well, she said it was Heather's favorite color. Okay. So my daughter, Sarah, God forbid, if she was killed, her favorite color is green. Am I going to say, look, I want all of you to wear green? It was Sarah's favorite. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't feel right. Now, what about this color purple? Let me see if I can find the printout here. I might have to get back to this, Bill. I don't see my printout of the color purple. Anyway, it had to do with the Masonic meaning of the color purple. And this was just one site that I went to. It was their own site, that the color purple was representative of the highest order, their master, the equivalent of a priest of a congregation or the pastor of a congregation. The purple represents the master of a Masonic lodge. And I thought that I had that here somewhere. I'll see if I can come back to that. That's strange. I thought I had that. Give me 1 second here. It might be in this pile here. You see what happens, Bill, when you have a full-time job. You know, Anderson Cooper can sit around all day on his rear end and get ready for his fake news broadcasts.
Right.
But we have to work, Bill, so sometimes we're casualties of this. But I did want to read that. I'll see if I can come back to that. Here's the other thing, Bill. There's no way that anyone can convince me. Number one, that it was in clear view. The car, I think it was a Dodge Charger, that was allegedly driven by David Fields, where you could clearly see the license plate number. GMV, no big deal there. I'm not making anything out of that. And the four numbers, 1111. Now this 1111 is an Illuminati number. There are theories of what 1111 means, or 1111. 1111. This is from one website. 5 reasons you are seeing, and I'll tell you, this happens to me all the time, Bill. I always see, for some reason, my attention is always drawn to the clock. How many times a day is it 11:11? Twice, right?
Yep.
I'm telling you, I see it 2 times a day, every day. Here are 5 reasons, according to the author of this article. First meaning of 1111. Pay attention to your thoughts. One of the meanings of 1111 is that the universe has sampled your thought sequence, and that will manifest almost instantly in your physical reality. In this sense, 1111 or 111 is a message from divine angel beings that you need to monitor your thoughts with greater attention and make sure that they are focusing on the things that you want and not the things that you don't want. Second meaning of 1111 or 1111. You can start manifesting your true self. What do you want to manifest into your life experience? This is the first question you need to ask yourself when you're seeing 1111. Another meaning of 1111 is that you are sent a divine message to remember that you are the creator of your reality, and you need to take responsibility for it. Your current situation is the result of your past thoughts and actions. Where I'm going with this, Bill, this is all New Age thought. This is occultic thought. This is straight down from the Illuminati handbook.
Yes, it is.
There's no way anybody can convince me that it was coincidence that license plate had 1111 and was clearly visible. Third meaning of 1111. You remember yourself. 1111 is a coded molecular structure of remembering and reactivating the inner master that resides within you, your true self. Remember is a term that emphasizes the idea of putting the pieces of yourself, your members, together into their rightful order. Wow. In a way, remembering who you really are. This is all New Age thought, Bill, and they're using these codes in plain sight to mock us and to also give signals to others. It's almost like the devil hand, the Baphomet hand sign that we've seen so many times from the entertainment world and from the political world. Yeah. Fourth meaning of 1111. You are on the path of awakening. Whenever you're seeing 1111 or 111 number patterns, you're called to awaken. See, Bill, this is what this is about. This is what they're doing. They're creating a new reality. I'm telling you, folks. They're creating a new reality. They're creating an awakening for people. A direct channel opens between you and your higher self. 1111 is a point of merging the physical and non-physical realities of you. When this happens, it's time to stop from any mundane activity you're doing and look at the bigger picture of life. That's what they're doing, Bill. Wow. They're looking at the bigger picture of life. This is what the New World Order is.
It is.
This is the new reality they're creating. This is why I say these events are staged and the film is looped and it's created, it's acted out. Can I prove it? No, I can't prove it. All of this is circumstantial evidence. I admit that. But it's not based in nothing. Again, going back to the reality, is the devil? Is Satan a real being? Mm-hmm. If you understand that, and understand what he's doing, and understand his agenda, he's using these people that stage these events to bring about his agenda. Here's the fifth meaning of 1111. Set an intention. Make a wish. Whenever you're seeing 1111, know that it is a wake-up call of divine intervention. Think about that, Bill. Mm-hmm. It's a wake-up call of divine intervention. That's what these people, this is the message that these people think that they're illuminated with special knowledge. This goes back to Gnosticism.
It is. Yep.
These people believe that they have special, and they admit that it's from Lucifer. Mm. And if you want to go back to our interview with Tina, as she draws out and makes the case for what Luciferianism is, it's the religion of the Illuminati.
Yeah.
I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to that. It's time to make a wish and know your intention can manifest for your highest good and for all mankind. It's the intention of the thought itself that counts. It's a wake-up call, Bill. That's what they're saying. It's a wake-up call. Mm. That's just one sample that I came across of what 1111 means. I mean, think of all the license plates. How many times have you gotten behind a license plate, Bill, and noticed a 1111?
I can't remember any time.
And it just so happens that in this event, and it's captured clearly on video. Please, folks. Okay, so Bill, what's the fallout of all this? Unless you have any comments on anything that I've said. What time do we got?
Yeah, it's 9:22. Yeah, I would like to.
All right, we got.
I'd like
to
to comment a little bit about the 1111. If
Good.
I could. When I looked into this the other night after you had given me some information on it, and I investigated a little further, and this number comes up a lot, Joe, in plans for the New World Order to take its place, to replace sovereign nations. So I think that you accurately portrayed this as an awakening. I think that this is what this is all leading to in some way. An awakening to not only bring about human thought, Joe, but I believe it's an awakening of the spirits that are mentioned in Revelation. These spirits that come out of the depths of the earth, that that John saw, that that come out and mislead people and also give validation to the Antichrist. So this is more than just a staged event. I think that you've hit on something here, Joe, that that everybody else has missed. Because this is an awakening of New Age thought, New Age practice, and a New Age belief system in that you, and this is the oldest lie there is, Joe, you can be God. You can be the master of your own universe.
That's right.
And as I read more about it, Joe, and I'll tell you what, I almost fell asleep at the computer. I was up so late looking at it. Because if you look into it enough, you are going to find boatloads, and I mean boatloads of information on 1111.
That's right, Bill, and that much more so than the Heather Heyer's mother suggesting to people to wear purple. Mm-hmm. Purple is also an Illuminati Masonic color of code.
Yeah.
That they hold in it's a royal color to them. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't fit with her saying that. It just, like I said, you become, Bill, you literally become a detective. Nobody, I didn't ask to fall into, we fell into examining these false flag events. There's no walking away from it once you get into it. And once you see that the things that were said to have happened could not have happened the way that they were portrayed to be happened, to have happened. And so you start picking up clues here and there. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is going to the latest movie and going to the latest ball game and going here and there in the world of entertainment. You know, we take our times of refreshment, but when something like this happens and I'm watching the news, your detective mind engages right away. You can't just watch it for entertainment. Mm-hmm. You pick up on all these signs. And here's the other thing about when I'm driving to work the other morning, last week, and it was the day of the alleged funeral for Heather Heyer. You know, this woman has achieved sainthood. You know, all of the lofty statements about this woman, and you know, if this really happened and she really got mowed down by a car, it's a tragedy. But don't tell me that she's Mother Teresa now. The thing that I heard on KYW that really, and you got to remember that these news outlets, quote unquote news outlets like KYW, what a piece of garbage of a station that it used to be a great station. Now it's a junk station that's basically used for car commercials and plumbers and painters and all sorts of commercials. And in 60 minutes they may squeeze 5 minutes of news in. Yeah. The rest of it was a bunch of junk. But what I heard them say is that Heather Heyer's mother gave an emotional plea to mourners to wear purple, and they played her plea. There was nothing emotional about it whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, what? Am I a complete fool? You're going to tell me that this woman was emotional on this piece you're going to play, and I don't hear any emotion whatsoever? This is what I mean, Bill. They're like creating a new reality. Yeah. Just believe what we say. Don't believe your eyes. Don't believe your ears. We'll tell you what's happening. This woman's emotional. It sounded to me like she was reading from a script. Okay, let's talk about the fallout. And I'm going to try to really speed this up here. First of all, what I've seen is the mob mentality that I mentioned earlier, Bill. It's easy to jump on the pile and stand behind those with the bullhorns like CNN and other quote-unquote news outlets, and that's what many of these quote-unquote Republicans have done. They've jumped on the bandwagon, and they've gotten behind the bullhorn blasters like Anderson Cooper and Jake Tapper and Don Lemon and guys like that. It's the easiest road to take. The hardest thing to do is to, you have a feeling about something, you have a perspective that goes totally against the flow, and you put it out there, like the congressman that you mentioned earlier. The easiest thing to do is to jump on the pile, because that's what everybody's doing. It's always been the easiest thing to do. here are some of the. This goes into some of the things some of the fallout. Ilya Soman. I heard this on NPR. Ilya Soman, professor of history at George Mason University. He said that Confederate figures like Robert E. Lee are known solely for defending slavery. Now, I am not a Civil War buff, but that didn't sound right to me. Mm-hmm. That he is known solely, probably by many people, solely for the slavery. Mm-hmm. So I Googled it, and I got a statement from Robert E. Lee, mm-hmm. and I got a short bio about Robert E. Lee. Mm-hmm. Here is a statement from Robert E. Lee that he made on May 1st, 1870. Because here's another easiest thing in the world to do today, Bill. It's to jump on Robert E. Lee, mm-hmm. to tear his statue down and to spit on it and to kick it. Those criminals that did all that, wherever his statue was torn down. Yep. And they're seen as pious, righteous defenders of humanity and haters of evil. And you go and break the law and you tear these statues down and police stand around and watch. Like if police saw me throwing a brick through a window, are they going to stand there and watch me? No, they're going to arrest me. Yeah. Here's what Robert E. Lee said on May 1st, 1870. So far from engaging in a war to perpetuate slavery, I am rejoiced that slavery is abolished. I believe it will be greatly for the interest of the South. So fully am I satisfied of this, that I would have cheerfully lost all that I have lost by the war, and have suffered all that I have suffered to have this object attained. That's a direct quote from Robert E. Lee. Here is a short bio. In the interest of time, I can't read all of it. Mm-hmm. By his achievements, he won a high place amongst the great generals of history. Though hampered by lack of materials and by political necessities, his strategy was daring always, and he never hesitated to take the gravest risks. On the field of battle, he was as energetic in attack as he was constant in defense, and his personal influence over the men whom he led was extraordinary. No student of the American Civil War can fail to notice how the influence of Lee dominated the course of the struggle, and his surpassing ability was never more conspicuously shown than in the last hopeless stages of the contest. The personal history of Lee is lost in the history of the great crisis of America's national life. Friends and foes alike acknowledge the purity of his motives, the virtues of his private life, his earnest Christianity, and the unrepining loyalty with which he accepted the ruin of his party. Now, you're not going to hear that from any of the talking heads that are on NPR or on CNN. You're going to have Robert E. Lee portrayed as a vicious slave defender and a vicious hater of blacks. You're not going to hear this about Robert E. Lee. Mm-hmm. Trump's response to reporters regarding the removal of Confederate symbols, Bill. He asked if statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson should be torn down.
Right. Legitimate question.
Because they own slaves. There was no response from the press corps when he asked that, when he made that. You know, Bill, presidents just don't do that, right? Presidents just, when issues come up, they're used to patented answers that a Obama would give, or a Bush would give, or a Clinton would give. No, He stands for what he believes, agree or disagree with him. He challenged the reporters. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. George Washington owned slaves. You're going to tear down their statues? Oh, but then the defense comes in. Oh, but they were known for doing good things as well. Well, if your issue is slavery and the evil of slavery, the fact that these guys owned slaves means that they must have been okay with it. So tear down their statues too. A 22-year-old black female admitted to placing a rope on the statue of Robert E. Lee. I believe it was in Durham, South Carolina, or North Carolina. Durham, North Carolina. She admitted it, and as it was torn down, she stated, "I am tired of white privilege with their foot on my neck and others like me." You see, that's the attitude that they want to foster, Bill.
It is.
That is the attitude that the New World Order jokers want to foster. They want to separate people. They don't want to bring people together.
No.
They want to get you to notice color. They don't want to get you to forget color. As I said earlier, there was a statue of Robert E. Lee torn down while police watched. There was a pastor, a quote-unquote pastor in North Carolina, Bill, who supported the smashing of the Robert E. Lee statue because, quote, it reminds people who's important and who isn't. Let me read a little bit from this quote-unquote pastor. I think I have this. Yeah. Here's the heading, Bill. Robert E. Lee's relative is a North Carolina pastor. He says, quote, supremacy was never God's plan. Oh, gee, thank you for that, pastor. Boy, what a profound... I would have never known that supremacy was never God's plan.
Wow.
Every time the Reverend Robert Wright Lee IV hands his credit card to a department store cashier, he braces for the question, "Are you related to General Robert E. Lee?" In the past, he has hesitated to answer, though his answer is yes. Lee is his great-great-great-great uncle. At the checkout counter, you don't always want to get into a conversation about how proud somebody is of their Confederate history and how the South will rise again, Lee said. But this week, he is acknowledging his family ties to say it's time to move monuments of his ancestor into museums where they can be used more to educate than to inflame. He has given an interview to HuffPost and is scheduled to be on NPR's Weekend Edition. No surprise there. "I don't speak for the rest of my family," said Lee in a phone interview. He's a North Carolina native who grew up in Statesville. "But for some of us, it's hard to sit here while our relative is being used as a symbol for hate and white supremacy," he said. Lee has ties to the Triangle. He graduated in May from Duke Divinity School with a master's in theology and was pastoral intern at Edenton Street United Methodist Church in Raleigh. He now serves as adjunct professor at Appalachian State University and as a pastor at the United Church of Christ in Winston-Salem. We have to speak up and speak out in God's name. On Sunday, Lee was going to be guest preacher at Broad Street United Methodist Church in Statesville. He already had prepared a sermon when he heard the news that the protests in Charlottesville had turned violent and that a self-identified Nazi had driven his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing one and injuring 19 others. "I completely changed my sermon," he said. "As a white male, I knew I couldn't do justice to what was going on, but I can begin the conversation by acknowledging my white privilege." So this is further evidence to me, Bill, that I need to feel guilty.
Yeah.
I need to be very unhappy that even though I'm Italian, my skin kind of looks olive to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a person of color. I'm a white person, and I have enjoyed white privilege my whole life. That's the other message, white privilege. And boy, we talked about that when we did the show about the women's march back in, what was that, January. Mm-hmm. The white privilege, the white privilege banner that's out there, that everybody thinks that the white man has the privilege. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm here to tell you that we don't. We really don't. No. That's a fantasy that you've bought into from outlets like CNN and NPR.
No question.
I don't give a rat's behind that I'm white. The most important thing to me is that I know that I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. I'm on my way because of Christ's shed blood. Mm-hmm. And as I said earlier, in the scriptures it says that you don't look at ethnicity. In Christ all are one. But the world wants you to notice all of the ethnicities.
Yeah.
Here's a great one, Bill. Here's a really great one. Mm-hmm. And when we get close to like quarter of, are we near quarter of?
We're close. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Give me a heads up when we get there. The Delaware governor, he called for the removal of Confederate symbols. You know, this is another example of jumping on the pile and jumping to the nearest microphone to make yourself look like a loving person, a person where no hate lives, like those signs that you see on lawns. Mm-hmm. Hate has no home here. These politicians love to get in front of the microphones and say hate has no home in this politician. The governor as the national conversation heats up again over whether Confederate stashes and flags are neutral historical relics or glorifications of racism and slavery, the Delaware Confederate Monument, with its Confederate flag waving proudly on private property in Georgetown, appears safer now. Asked about the future of the monument Monday, Delaware Governor John Carney said, quote, "I think the Confederate flags that are flying across the South and different places like Georgetown misrepresent the history. They've been a way of rewriting the history since Civil War times, and I think we ought to follow the lead of South Carolina and take them down."
Huh?
Yeah. That's a stupid, moronic politician for you. So then here comes the cleanup from his spokesman, Bill. Carney spokesman Jonathan Starkey clarified the governor's statement Tuesday, explaining that Carney thinks, quote, "it's appropriate to display a Confederate flag on public property as a symbol of our country's history with racism and injustice. But Delawareans have a right to display flags on their private property, even in cases where those flags are offensive to most people," Starkey said. So he basically had to come on and say, I know the governor sounded like a dumbass, but here's what he really meant to say. Now, he sounded like a dumbass because he is a dumbass. We have Confederate symbols that are in peril all over the nation. In Annapolis, Maryland, in Austin, Texas, in Baltimore, in Durham, North Carolina, in Gainesville, Florida, in New Orleans, in Boston, in Charlottesville, in Jacksonville, in Lexington, Kentucky, in Memphis, in Richmond, Virginia, in Stone Mountain, Georgia, in Tampa, Florida, in the Bronx. And I'm not going to say which ones are in peril of coming down, but to say that they misrepresent history, they are history.
Wow.
And we can't go into what the Civil War was all about, but it wasn't all about slavery, folks. Do your own research. Mm-hmm. Find a website that is not agenda-driven. Find someone who just cares about the historical content of the Civil War, who doesn't want to shape your mind.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, we're at 9:45.
Okay. And then you had, this is still under the fallout bill.
Mm-hmm.
You had the CEOs that resigned
Yeah.
from Donald Trump's Economic Advisory Council.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that as well, and I don't seem to see that anywhere. But there were many, like the CEO of Merck, CEO of Under Armour. It's easy to find out if you want to. It's funny because there were CEOs that resigned, quote unquote, resigned after Trump disbanded the council. Yeah, right. It's like saying, Bill, I'm firing you right now, and you say, Joe, I quit.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fire me.
You had all these, right? You had all these cowards jumping ship, and they all had these pious statements. They were all canned. We categorically denounce racism and white supremacy and stand against all manifestations of hate in any form and shape that they. You know, you had all these guys stand. It's all a business decision.
Yeah.
Bunch of cowards that jump ship.
Yeah. It's all according to their bottom line.
Yeah. And Bill, you know what? This is the last of the fallout.
Yeah.
Now it's stretching into other areas. You and I remember Mayor Frank Rizzo from the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
In Philadelphia. Now you have a statue of Frank Rizzo that was vandalized.
Yep.
And his mural in South Philadelphia vandalized. But these people are portrayed as being angry against white racism.
Yeah.
You know, Frank Rizzo was a law and order guy.
Yep.
And if you listen to his son, he wasn't a racist. Unless you want to call his son a liar.
Mm-hmm.
He was a man that stood for law and order. Now, it's funny that we have a W. Wilson Good elementary school in Philadelphia when that nitwit back in the 80s dropped a bomb and killed 11 people of color in the MOVE confrontation when he was the mayor. But you have a W. Wilson Good elementary school down there, don't you?
Uh-huh.
And you reelected him after that, after he killed 11 people.
Incredible.
And I want people to think about these things.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, can I add one more thing to the fallout?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And you alluded a little bit to this prior when you were discussing Pastor Lee. But I want to talk about the fallout within the body of believers, and this is really disturbing to me. And this is from the Atlantic. And it says, how will the church reckon with Charlottesville? And then the subheading says, religious communities are grappling with the racism that enabled violent attacks against protesters, including their own racism within their ranks. Catch that? Within the ranks of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And this will only take a couple minutes. On Saturday,
Sure.
white supremacists violently attacked protesters marching against them in Charlottesville. A 20-year-old man, James Alex Fields Jr., allegedly rammed his car into a crowd of people, killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer and injuring at least 19 others. 2 state police officers also died while monitoring protests after their helicopter crashed. The next day was Sunday, and that mattered. And here you go, Joe. Religious communities in America have long struggled with racism in and outside of their churches. Christians in particular have worked to overcome their complicity in slavery and Jim Crow. Almost immediately after the Charlottesville murder, a wide range of Christian leaders spoke out against the violence, encouraging fellow Christians to condemn white supremacism. But something else happened too. Some people got angry, really angry, at white Christians, who they see as being complicit in a culture of systemic racism. This included white Christians, black Christians, liberals, and conservatives. Many people within the church are frustrated with what they see as passivity in the face of bigotry. In the same way that Muslims are often expected to take responsibility for those on their fringes who commit violent acts of terrorism, people demanded that white Christians account for their violent racism who claim to share their faith. Some Christian leaders were quick to condemn Charlottesville in specific strong terms, such as Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, who serves as president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. He called them abhorrent acts of hatred. Cardinal Blaise Kupich, who heads the Archdiocese of Chicago and is widely seen as a close ally of Pope Francis, seemed to criticize President Trump's initial statement on the attacks, which cited hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. When it comes to racism, there's only one side to stand against it, said Kupich, which I agree with. We should stand against it. Russell Moore, the head of the political arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, tweeted that the so-called alternative right white supremacist ideologies are antichrist and satanic to the core. Jack Graham, a Texas megachurch pastor who serves on Trump's Evangelical Advisory Committee, wrote that white supremacy and its movements are evil to the core and are to be condemned. However, other white Christian leaders spoke out only in vague terms, such as Franklin Graham, the evangelist and son of Billy Graham. He asked his Facebook followers to pray for the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, for law enforcement, and for everyone struggling to deal with the chaos and violence that reared its ugly head in Charlottesville. But he cited neither racism nor white supremacy. Tracy Blackman, the executive minister of Justice and Witness Ministries for the United Church of Christ, was at the protest in Charlottesville. And she said, pulling aside to avoid getting swept up in a fight in the middle of an interview with MSNBC, expressed exhaustion on Facebook to her fellow pastors. She wrote, "Might you consider beginning your worship tomorrow morning with prayer for our nation and the people of Charlottesville in particular? Will you pray for the wounded, the healers, the witnesses, the warriors, and the dead inside? Will you pray for the families of those who have died, and will you call out white supremacy by name and rebuke it in the name of Jesus?" Many prominent church leaders called on their fellow pastors to do the same thing this Sunday morning. At the non-denominational Protestant church I was at in northern New Jersey, the pastor spent several minutes ahead of his sermon talking to his congregation about what happened. He said, "To see American streets with people walking down doing the Heil Hitler salute is disturbing." He asked the congregants to pray for America. "We live in a pretty politically divided country, but as followers of Jesus, we need to make sure that whatever we think politically, we clearly and loudly condemn any ideology that espouses bigotry, hatred, discrimination, and violence. We're called to testify and be ambassadors to a kingdom that's going to be summed up with every tongue, every tribe, every nation, worshiping the Lord Jesus Christ on the throne. And to those who are afraid," he said, "remember that Jesus overcame the world." And
wow.
That was the article in The Atlantic. I'm going to wrap it up. My little thing here, Joe, was something that
Sure.
I saw posted on Facebook today. And this was posted by a mutual friend of ours who is the pastor of a multinational church in Philadelphia. And he wrote this, Joe, and I thought that this was something that a Christian can get behind, because I think that it's perfect in the way it's stated. And it says this: I am white. I'm not proud of being white, but neither am I ashamed of it. I'm white because God designed it that way. If I were to be proud about being white, I would take credit for God's design. And if I were ashamed of being white, I would belittle his design. I abhor white supremacy while I affirm white legitimacy. Being white does not make me superior, but being white is good and legitimate in God's creation. Before God, I'm not guilty or exonerated simply because I'm white. I am forgiven and accepted by God because of Jesus, not because I am white. I accept my whiteness as God's providential design and gift. I joyfully rest in God's good providence. In my whiteness, I am thankful to have black, Asian, and Hispanic brothers and sisters in Christ who also affirm with joy God's good providence in their identity. And they would readily affirm the above statement and replace white with black, Asian, or Hispanic. Race is not an issue when it is seen as a good gift from God. Race is not an issue when grace is the main issue, when we truly worship Jesus Christ as Lord. And I think that perfectly sums it up, Joe. And for these other Christian leaders to react in that way along racial lines does a disservice to Jesus Christ.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Bill, and I can't add to anything our mutual friend posted on Facebook, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. And it seems like these national celebrity Christians took the easy road, as I referred to earlier. Yep. They took the easy road. That's all. I mean, they got to look at themselves in the mirror when they shave or when they put their stockings on. You know, they when they pray, they got to go before the Lord and try to reconcile their words with what the Scriptures say. So, in taking the easy road, there's a price tag for that.
Yeah.
Ultimately. Where are we in time, Bill?
We have about 8 minutes.
Okay, I'll quickly go through this then.
Okay.
I want people to think about this. Think about these things that I'm going to say now. To those who lambasted Donald Trump for not responding in the way they wanted, did you jump up and down and do a war dance after every alleged ISIS attack in which Barack Obama refused to identify Islam as the base religion of those quote-unquote extremists? Did you make a fuss when Barack Obama refused to identify the Black Lives Matter movement as the group whose march was the basis of the 6 Dallas police officers who allegedly lost their lives as a result? To those who cry out against the hate of hate groups, NPR had the story of an individual, Bill, who was identified, I think it was on Facebook, as a marcher, as a white supremacist. And it wasn't him. It was a misidentification. And as a result, this guy received death threats. He feared for his life so badly, Bill, that he had to move his family as a result.
Oh.
So you people who preach love and speak out against hate, you're gonna bring us to your side if you have to kill us, right?
Yeah.
You think it's acceptable to destroy public property, Confederate symbols? You think that's okay because you're perceived as the good guys? Bill, I mean, my goodness, have we taken complete leave of our senses
Yeah.
Do we think that the violence in Charlottesville was all one-sided? We don't even know what precipitated it.
No.
That's why I said earlier I wanted to have people on from both sides. What started the violence? I know that there's facts involved. I know that the protesters got permits, even though they don't need, according to the Constitution. We have the right to assemble peaceably.
Right.
But, they got a permit. They were going to protest the planned taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. And what happened from there? I don't know. I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But for anybody to think that, as Donald Trump said, that the violence wasn't on all sides, you're kidding yourself. You really believe that? Oh, and by the way, Bill, on a much lighter note, I guess it's a much lighter note. Many voices have chimed in with their opinions, their thoughts on the Charlottesville incident. NPR had on an individual from Clemson University. Now, this is how your tax dollars are wasted. If you're a university, if a university gets tax dollars, public tax dollars, that's why a lot of former colleges are now universities. The individual interviewed on NPR was the assistant director of hip hop at Clemson University.
Oh.
Now, if people don't get pissed off that their tax dollars are spent teaching hip hop, then I don't know what is going to get people ticked off. Here's my conclusion, Bill. So what is really happening here? I believe it's fairly simple. I believe it's all about creating division among people.
Yep.
And division can be accomplished in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. You have the quote-unquote hate groups versus the quote-unquote love groups or the anti-hate groups. You have the pro-gun people versus the anti-gun people. That was the Sandy Hook issue. It seems to me, Bill, that the main instrument of creating division has been the use of false flags.
Yeah.
We've seen within the last 5 years or so the implementation of racial false flags, the most recent being Charlottesville. I think it's clear that there is deception going on because the scope is grossly exaggerated. We don't see white supremacy movements surfacing everywhere, as mainstream media outlets have irresponsibly led many to believe. And if you do, if you're listening to this broadcast, send the information to either Bill's contact information or my contact information. Go to our website and put it on there. It appears to me, Bill, that there is an attempt at creating an alternate reality. Mm-hmm. I repeat, I believe that there is an attempt at creating an alternate reality, getting people to sit down when they hear of an event happening like Charlottesville and putting the news on and believing everything that you see as default, as your default position, completely lacking in critical judgment. Mm-hmm. Not employing any scrutiny whatsoever, just digesting what the host and their panelists show you. Mm-hmm. Your default position has been set to belief. For me, Bill, the reality is that the races have lived together just fine. Yeah. There's problems. There's always going to be problems because we are still in the flesh.
No question, Joe.
We are still in the same way that we struggle with sexual addictions and substance addictions and addictions to power, addictions to money, to possessions. Mm-hmm. You're going to struggle with racial tensions. But it's been blown out of proportion.
Yep.
Race is harped by the people of color movement. Prophets like CNN's Anna Navarro and Bakari Sellers and Van Jones. They love to jump on these events right after they happen, and they love to exaggerate the scope of the event. Like, this is a systemic problem all across the United States. Tomorrow you're probably not going to get to work on time because you're going to have to go through a Ku Klux Klan rally in Philadelphia. That's not happening, folks. I'll tell you what does happen, though, Bill. Here's what happens that disturbs me.
Yeah.
That these people that preach togetherness and unity, and they speak out against, apparently the white race is the only race that has hate and bigotry. Apparently the people of color have eliminated that from their DNA. Yeah. So here's what happens. Whenever something like this happens, the next time I go into a store, I see a person that's black or brown, and I think to myself, what are they thinking when they look at me? I don't even want to think that. You know, I don't think those things until something like this happens. Right. And then these clowns get on there and say how widespread the problem is, and then my humanity kicks in, and I think, well, what are they thinking when they look at me? So they are so convoluted in their thought process, so hypocritical. They would have you believe that, oh, they want to live in a world where nobody sees color, and yet at the same time you got affirmative action, you've got all of these programs for people of color. They want to take because they're black, because they're brown, because they're yellow. And the bottom line is that there's an agenda going on to divide people. And the only thing truly that unites people is what our dear friend said. It's Jesus Christ. He's the only one that unites people. Even in the body of Christ, you have issues because, again, we're still in the flesh. We're not perfect. We're going to have problems. Mm-hmm. That's all going to end when we have new bodies, when Christ comes here to establish his earthly kingdom for 1,000 years. And then after that, when the new heavens and the new earth come down out of heaven from God. But until then, we're always going to have struggles with the flesh. But don't exaggerate what's going on. Try being a news outlet for once. Mm-hmm. So that'll wrap up our examination of Charlottesville, Bill.
Yeah.
Bottom line for me is I think that they're, with all these false flags, they're trying to create a new reality.
Yep. I agree.
And it's working. It's working.
It really is.
Because if you bring up that you don't think Sandy Hook happened, you're a conspiracy theorist. Boston, you're a conspiracy theorist. You should believe that a guy that just had his legs blown off is going to be put in a wheelchair and rolled down the street. You should believe that. And he's going to be awake. Jeff Bauman. If you don't, you're a conspiracy theorist. So they're creating a new reality, Bill, and you really got to engage, folks. You got to look at what's being said, and you got to scrutinize the news. Mm-hmm. These guys are actors. They're teleprompter readers. Bill, I'm telling you, these times are so deceptive, and the devil is scheming in so many different ways, on so many different levels, with so many different outlets. It's unprecedented.
Yep.
That's all I got tonight, brother.
Well, thanks for that, Joe. That was an awesome analyzation of what happened back on August the 12th. And I'll tell you, Joe, if the powers that be would have their way, what we saw happen there would be only the beginning of civil unrest to the degree that we've never seen before in this country since the 60s. And
that's right.
And I think that you rightly wrapped it up by saying that that's what they're shooting for. And it certainly looks like that's what they're going to get to, because you have so many, as you rightly pointed out, Joe, that just take in what they hear on these broadcasts, these cable news outlets, and take it as gospel and just believe it totally, and then react on it. So it bears watching. We have to keep our eyes on these things, and we have to rely on the Spirit to reveal what's going on behind the scenes, so that we're able to expose it.
Yeah, and I think that's not it's not an unreasonable challenge to people.
No.
Don't just be mindless entertainment watchers. Don't sit in front of the TV and disengage your mind. You have a mind for a reason. You're supposed to be critically thinking about what you see and what you hear, because they're allegedly catastrophic events. They're events that change the course of human life, that change laws, that change the way we live.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just sit in front of it and be passive about it.
Right.
You got to actively engage your mind and purposely think about things. It ain't easy, I know. But the alternative is that you have a nation of mindless people just walking around and being led by the nose, and I think that's where we are.
Yeah.
But for those people listening to us, I think they're listening for a reason. So hopefully we're making a difference in some lives, and people that hear us hopefully have influence on other people. Don't take these guys at face value, like Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon, and those guys have agendas, folks. They're entertainers. They're actors. They get paid a lot of money to do what they do.
Yeah. That's for sure. Well, folks, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight to Answers for the Paranormal. Thanks for listening to our broadcast, The New Age in Charlottesville, and look forward to getting back. Joe planning on doing something regarding the paranormal shortly, so we'll make that announcement as we get our plans nailed down with our guests and with our schedules themselves, Joe, because we have some crazy schedules, the two of us, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
So be looking out for that, and again, we want to wish you a pleasant night, and thanks for listening to us. And Joe will be in touch soon, and hope you have a great rest of the weekend, brother.
And you as well, brother.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to wish you a good night, and we'll catch you next time on Answers for the Paranormal.